This is breaking news. A nationwide manhunt has finally come to a close. Casey White and Vicky White were just captured in Evansville, Indiana by authorities. During a police chase, their vehicle crashed. Casey White surrendered to police and he's unharmed. However, Vicky White, who was driving, was transported to the hospital. She apparently suffered a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The injury is serious. Casey and Vicky White have been on the run since April 29th. Casey White was already serving 75 years for a slew of violent crimes. He was also about to go to trial for 2 capital murder charges. He could face the death penalty. Although they share the same last name, Casey and Vicky are not related, but it's clear that they have a romantic relationship. Days before the escape, Vicky sold her house well under market value. She bought a car with cash using an alias. She also bought an array of guns.
A woman in Xi'an, China was found dead in 2016 after being trapped inside of her apartment's elevator for an entire month. The woman, only identified as Miss Wu, was found after elevator maintenance returned to work on March 1st following a month-long break for the Chinese New Year. 2 maintenance men turned the elevator's power off on January 30th after it malfunctioned. They reportedly asked if anyone was inside and heard no response, but they failed to follow proper rules, which would have been to pry open the doors and double-check if anyone was inside. Once the cab was thought to be empty, it was returned to the apartment building's first floor. When Miss Wu was found, her hands were visibly mangled, likely from trying to get out. She also had one hand pressed against the door. It's believed Miss Wu died from starvation and fatal dehydration while being trapped in the elevator for the entire month. She was in her 40s and lived alone on the 15th floor. She reportedly kept to herself. Her relatives did come looking for her a couple of weeks prior to the horrific discovery and even reported her missing, but it was never connected to the elevator shutoff. At this point, it's unclear how nobody heard her screams for help. Residents in Miss Wu's building often complained about broken lights, water and power cutoffs, and constant elevator breakdowns. They even stated that management routinely ignored their complaints. Miss Wu's death and the negligence of the elevator company and the building's management office sparked outrage. Hundreds of residents in the Jialing district gathered at the apartment building to protest their anger about how something as simple as riding in an elevator in your own apartment can somehow turn deadly. A few people from the elevator repair company and the maintenance firm in charge of the faulty elevator were detained, but I'm unsure if any charges were ever brought.
You guys heard about the doctor who allegedly murdered 25 patients? 46-year-old Dr. William Hustle worked at the Mount Carmel West Hospital in Ohio when he was charged with 25 counts of murder but was only tried for 14 of those cases. William was accused of prescribing too much fentanyl to critically ill patients for 3.5 years, which resulted in their deaths. The case came to light in the fall of 2018 when pharmacists voiced concerns over the high amount of doses ordered by William. From the start, William has maintained his innocence, and his defense team argued that the patient's conditions caused their deaths and that the large doses were necessary to allow them to die in comfort and dignity after taking off ventilators. But prosecutors argued that William's practices went far beyond the norm. He ordered 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl for multiple patients, which is about 10 times more than the recommended dosage. A pharmacist testified that he initially wondered whether someone was stealing the medication. A patient named Troy Allison went to the hospital because he was struggling to breathe and had multiple health issues, and that's when William administered 1,000 micrograms of fentanyl without waiting for the CT scan, and Troy was later pronounced dead. William was initially charged in June 2019, but on April 20th, 2022, after a 7-week trial and 5 days of deliberation, William was found not guilty for the death of 14 patients.
This is huge true crime news. The Oklahoma Girl Scout murders from 1977 have been solved after 35 years. Lori, Michelle, and Denise were murdered in 1997 while attending a camp that they were at. There were several suspects and theories over the years, but it went unsolved for quite some time. In 1978, this man, Gene Leroy Hart, was actually arrested and charged with the murders. But there was not enough evidence against him, and he was acquitted. A few months after his acquittal, while he was still in jail on a different charge, he ended up passing away. And although he was acquitted, several investigators still believed that he was responsible for the murders. But there were also other suspects and other theories that couldn't be proven or ruled out. But now, thanks to advanced DNA technology, it has been confirmed that he is the killer. Unfortunately, since he passed away, he can't be charged. But hopefully they can now rest in peace.
On May 7th, 2015, Randy Jansen confessed to killing his entire family in a disturbing Facebook post. In the post, Randy explained that just 10 days prior, he shot and killed his 19-year-old daughter Emily because for the last 2 years she suffered from debilitating migraines and he couldn't watch her suffer anymore. He then states that he also shot his wife Laurel because, quote, "a mother should never have to hear the news her baby has died," end quote. 8 days after this, Randy confessed to also killing his sister Shelley so that she wouldn't have to live with the shame he'd caused. In the post, Randy states, quote, "Emily tried everything to get better, but nothing seemed to help her. I shot her in the head, and now she's migraine-free and floating in the clouds on a sunny afternoon. Now my family is pain-free and in heaven. So sorry to anyone I have hurt. Rest in peace, my little family. Love, Daddy-O." Concerned friends and family reported Randy's Facebook post to the police, who then went to Shelley's Langley, BC home and found her deceased. Authorities then went to the Jansen family home in Rosedale, Canada, where a 4-hour-long standoff occurred that resulted in Randy taking his own life before police could intervene.
2 parents were arrested this month in Slaughter, Louisiana after their daughter was found melted into their couch. I'm Danny, and Jack is still not feeling well, but he wanted me to tell you this awful new true crime story. Lacey Fletcher was just 36 years old when on January 3rd, her mother called 911 to report that she had stopped breathing. Police arrived. They were horrified to discover the remains of Lacey on the family couch. Lacey's body was fused to the couch by her own feces and urine. She was covered in insect bites and maggots. After years of neglect, her body had made a crater inside the couch. The coroner believing that Lacey may have sat in her own waste for up to 12 years on that couch. Some neighbors reporting that they hadn't seen Lacey in over 15 years. Some say that they didn't even know that Lacey's parents, Sheila and Clay, had a child. And while officials are describing this as one of the worst cases of neglect that they have ever seen, Lacey's parents are claiming that they've been through a lot of heartbreak before Lacey's death and they don't want to be re-victimized by the media. Claiming Lacey's severe social anxiety and diagnosed autism as the reason why she anchored herself in the couch and they couldn't get her to move. Some believe that Lacey may have what's known as locked-in syndrome, which from what I understand is a rare neurological disorder where you're basically paralyzed but you are still cognizant, you're still home. Which is kind of what Lacey's parents are alleging in order to take blame off of themselves for not taking Lacey into a doctor. However, the doctor has said that the only diagnosis that he's aware of that Lacey had was severe autism and social anxiety. Reportedly before this, both Sheila and Clay were known as fine, upstanding citizens in their community. Both very active members in their church, and Sheila was even the assistant to a prosecutor before she was on forced resignation in January when her daughter's body was found. So far, it seems like no one knew what was going on inside of the Fletcher household. And by the way, both Clay and Sheila have been released on bail. Neither of them is in prison right now. But until next time, as Jack would say, be good and try not to end up in a murder dock.
This is a crazy story of the serial killer who murdered his victims and removed their breasts. Wayne Adam Ford was obsessed with female breasts and partook in a year-long cold-blooded murder spree in California. He married his first wife Kelly Pletcher, but when things didn't work out due to his abuse and sick fantasies, she quickly asked for a divorce. Wayne later married another woman named Elizabeth, who then divorced him for the same reasons. He was always into very weird and questionable things, like he asked his wives to put a sheet over their bodies but only expose their breasts when being intimate. He also demanded that they take part in severe bondage, and he did a lot of creepy things like poke at their breasts with safety pins. Wayne began his murdering spree when his second marriage didn't work out. He began stalking his ex, and when he could not find her, he released his rage on random women he found on the street. On October 1997, Wayne strangled his first victim. He dismembered her body, and he kept some of it in his house and disposed of the rest in a nearby river. The next victim was a woman from Las Vegas, and her name was Tina Gibbs. Wayne sexually assaulted her, and then he strangled her, and then he revived her using CPR, and then he strangled her again and revived her, and he kept doing that over and over again until he couldn't revive her anymore and she passed away. Wayne murdered one more time until he attacked his last victim, 29-year-old Patricia Tamiz, and when police found her body, she had one breast removed. On November 3rd in 1998, Wayne got super drunk and then called his brother Rodney and confessed to all the murders. His brother then told Wayne to go to authorities and tell him everything. The next day, Wayne walked into the police station and told them about all the murders he had committed. And then he goes into his pocket and pulls out a severed breast that belonged to Patricia. Police were extremely disturbed, but Wayne told them that he had committed these crimes out of hate for his ex-wife and that he had chosen to turn himself in because he was about to kill her soon and he didn't want his son to be an orphan. Wayne was arrested and charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death.
Alpha Dog is a 2006 film based on a true story, and it's a pretty good movie. But here is that story. Hello, true crimers. This is the case of Nick Markowitz. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, this story actually begins with his brother, Ben Markowitz, and they lived in San Fernando Valley in California. There was nothing off about the family. They were all very respected. That is until Ben decided to get involved in some local gangs. And one of those gangs was led by this man, Jesse James Hollywood. For fuck's sakes. Now, Mr. Hollywood, he grew up in a very affluent family as well. Very respected, and he was on his way to a great sports career. But then he hurt his back, so he said, you know what I should do instead? Sell drugs! The obvious backup plan. Well, then it got to a point where Ben Markowitz owed Hollywood money, somewhere around $1,200. And Ben, he couldn't pay up. Ben's little brother, 15-year-old Nick Markowitz, he loved his brother. He was also doing really well in high school. He was a theater kid, and he had zero involvement in Ben's wrongdoings. But apparently that didn't matter. Right in the middle of the afternoon of August 6, 2000, Nick Markowitz was out on the street just taking a walk, when 21-year-old Jesse Rouge and another person named William Skidmore, they drove their van right up next to Nick Markowitz and kidnapped him. You see, the two of them worked for Mr. Hollywood. Witnesses saw this happen. Police were immediately called, but they could not find the vehicle based on the license plate number the witness had. For the next couple of days, his captors actually treated him, well, like a friend, I guess. He played video games, he watched movies, he partied with them. He was just kind of naive and said, it's okay, I'm doing this for my brother. I'll be okay, I'll be returned. He even kind of made friends with a couple of them. But then JJH here, well, apparently he asked a lawyer, and he found out that kidnapping wasn't so great, and he could go away for a long time for it. You needed to ask a lawyer for that? So he decided that Nick Markowitz needed to be killed, but he wouldn't do it himself. He asked Jesse Rouge to do it. He said no. So he asked 21-year-old Ryan Hoyt to do it for him. Hoyt also owed him money. He said, if you do this, then we're even Stevens. So Hoyt, Rouge, and 17-year-old Graham Presley, they took him to Lizard's Head Trail, dug a hole, forced him inside, and they shot him 10 times until he was dead. He was found 2 days later. They were arrested within a week. Hoyt was sentenced to death. He got 11 years. He was found 6 years later. He got life.